Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Falling Walls Breakthrough Conversations. With this format, which is realized in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Education and Research and Springer in Nature, we created an intimate space for interact with global science leaders and entrepreneurs, innovators. And the idea is to talk about their path, their career, research, and other interesting topics. So I encourage you, audience that is online, to take this opportunity to interact with the speakers. And we have an option to raise your hand during the Zoom call. So my name is Filipe Almeida. I'm an editor at Nature Biomedical Engineering. And pretty much, the introduction, that's all for the technical aspects of it. And so today we have the pleasure to have Arun Majumdar. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Apologies if not. So Arun is the J. Precourt Provostial Chair Professor at Stanford University, Dean of the Stanford Dwyer School of Sustainability, Professor of Mechanical Engineering, and Senior Fellow and former Director of the Precourt Institute for Energy. So Arun has a very extensive background, and he has also been involved in U.S. administrations, namely in Obama, as the founding director of the Advanced Research Project Agency, and so on. So thank you so much for being here, Arun. It's a pleasure to meet you. And I'm home.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. And I would like to start asking you about your Breaking the Wall to Holistic Sustainability talk that you're going to that is going to take place later on in the afternoon. So can you explain a little bit what the holistic sustainability is?
Well, I mean, clearly there's a major challenge ahead of us for the 21st century on issues related to energy, decarbonization of our energy system, reducing our emissions, negative emissions. That's just the energy part. But what we do in energy affects water. What we do at water affects food and agriculture. What we do in food affects biodiversity, that affects ecology, that affects public health. And so these are all interrelated, and you cannot separate them out. And they also include not just scientific, like physical science, biological sciences. It also includes the social sciences. At the end of the day, they affect people. And as we learned from COVID, it's one thing to come up with breakthrough technologies like the mRNA vaccines. It's an entirely different thing for people to trust it and get vaccinated. And so there are social science aspects to this on various aspects of sustainability as well. So I think it is that holistic view, the panoramic view of issues related to sustainability is critical. They're critical to have that view, because otherwise we may be solving problems in silos without understanding the unintended consequences of what we do in other areas. And as we all know, we are living in the unintended consequence of the 20th century issues, so we can't afford to do that anymore. So that's the holistic view of the sustainability challenge.
Fascinating. And so you hold many different positions, not only you are at J. Precourt Provostial Chair, as I mentioned in the introduction, and the other positions. Would you say that the different perspectives you take on these different roles benefit you, and to bring diversity to these many areas?
Yeah, I mean, I've been blessed with, working in academia for most of my professional career, but also in government on both the R&D side and the policy side. In business, I worked in corporate world as well for a few years and engaged with them on a regular basis. and in national labs. The U.S. is, again, very blessed with a whole network of infrastructure for scientific labs, national labs. So I've had the opportunity to engage in all of them. And that does give you a different perspective, because being in a single organization gives you a view of things that is not holistic. And so for me, my engagement in the government was very impactful for me, because it gave a panoramic view of all aspects of energy and climate issues, as well as the academic, the business side, the policy side, the finance, and the social sciences side as well. So that was very impactful for me.
Interesting. So, in terms of, as you said, you've been involved in politics as well. So, what did you bring to the lab after interacting with politicians? Yeah. What did you learn that then you were able to feed into your research?
If I may just make one correction. I've never been involved in politics. I've been involved in policy.
Yes,
two
policy.
Different things.
Yeah, exactly.
But I have engaged as part of my job in Washington. I did engage with the politicians on both sides of the aisle, and frankly, that was one of the most, I would say, enlightening thing for me is to engage with the people who are representing people in the United States. So, and I think what you bring back is, to research is the holistic view of how research can impact society. And it also gives you a view of what problems to really solve. Oftentimes in the scientific world, we look at problems just for the sake of curiosity, and that's absolutely important to do. And these are what is often called the curiosity-driven research, because the problem is there. You're trying to push some limits, and you keep at it without the need for thinking about what the applications would be. And so this curiosity-driven research is very important, and that need to be preserved. But there's also this use-inspired research. And the use-inspired research is you're trying to solve a problem for greater good. And that is where understanding of the broader perspective of the journey of research beyond academia gives you an idea which problems to really go after, because if you solve them, then there could be impact. And so that's where I think it made a big difference for me, at least, in understanding the role of research in a broader society.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so, speaking up on that point, so what could change in the academic realm that will facilitate researchers to be involved more in policy and to have a broad and holistic vision of
I think it's
research?
A personal choice. I don't think all people want to be involved in the policy world is sort of decision making, but to make policy decisions, you got to understand a broader perspective. And that's not for everyone. But if there is interest in making impact on the research on society, not just in the scientific world, but in the society. I mean, we are living in the world today of changing energy landscape, and what we do today, whether it's renewable energy or nuclear energy and others. I mean, it has major implications in society, both on the economic development, energy security that we're seeing in Europe now, all of that, and climate. So if the intention of the research is to make an impact on those challenges, then understanding what the journey is very important, because what happens at university, and from a research point of view, if you're trying to breakthroughs in battery technology, for example, not everything that we do at a university actually scales up. And if it doesn't scale up, it doesn't make any impact, right? So the understanding of what is scalable and is very important if you're really trying to make an impact. And if you understand the journey beyond academia, you may solve a different problem than what you were thinking about. Because if you solve the wrong problem, it's not scalable. But if you solve the right one, it is scalable. And what does scalability mean? Well, if you really want to move fast and scale it, that technology may need infrastructure. And if the infrastructure is not available, it's going to take a long time and money to put that infrastructure. So leveraging existing scaled infrastructure is much easier to scale than leveraging supply chains, which now we are seeing there's a huge emphasis on that. If the supply chain doesn't exist, creating one takes time. So if you already have one and you're just tweaking it and leveraging it, you might as well, then that's a much better perspective. Then, of course, how much is it going to cost? Are there markets? Are there regulatory barriers that are there beyond academic? If your academic research is wildly successful, will it go beyond that? And I think understanding of that landscape and the journey really helps you to focus on what the right problems are so that you can make an impact. And this is complementary, I would say, to the curiosity-driven research, which is fundamentally, it needs to be pursued.
Wow, that's fascinating. You're touching in so many topics that, at least to me, are super interesting. But you mentioned the climate change, and what, in your perspective, is the main barriers that we're facing that contribute to our dependency on fossil fuel, and whether do you believe in a greener and more sustainable society in a short, medium-term future?
The answer to the second question is yes, absolutely yes. It has to be sustainable, otherwise we are in trouble. We may already be in trouble, frankly, because the way that we are emitting CO2, the rate of increase of CO2 emissions, the Earth has never seen anything like this before. And we are reaching levels that happened only several hundred million years ago. So I think both of them does not bode well for us. So we've got to change quickly. There's an urgency to this matter. And how do we need to address it? Well, certainly it's a combination, I would say, of technology. We need new innovations based on science and engineering, whether it's long duration storage or decarbonizing the industrial processes of cement making and steel making. Food and agriculture is a very big deal. And negative emissions of sucking out CO2 from the atmosphere. And they have to be, it's not that we cannot do that. We know how to do, sucking out CO2 from the atmosphere. It's called photosynthesis. But you got to do it at a cost metric, because if it doesn't come down in cost, it just doesn't scale. And so there are other economic factors in addition to the science and engineering. So the science and engineering becomes more difficult because it's constrained by some other factors. And that's a much harder problem to solve than trying to just solve it without any constraints, right? So I think those are important issues. So technology will certainly play a big role. But that alone is not going to be able to do this, because we are trying to solve a gigaton scale problem. And it's sometimes hard to conceive what a gigaton is. We're talking about tens of gigatons of CO2. If you add up the weight of all human beings on Earth, 8 billion people, you know what the weight is? Total weight of all human beings.
No, I don't.
It's half a gigaton.
Okay.
And we're now trying to solve a tens of gigatons problem. So the magnitude and the scale of that is unbelievable. It's unprecedented. We're talking about entirely new industries that need to come in and address this. That takes money, finance. That takes markets. That takes policy. And so technology is very important, but you need the other aspects of society to reinforce and pull the technology into the market. So you see that the complexity of the issue is pretty heavy. And so I think navigating this is going to be a challenge, but that requires, as we are now seeing in the United States, finally, we are making some policies that will encourage these technologies to be developed and deployed.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'd like to stay on this topic for a little bit longer, but we need to probably move on. And because I'm also curious to talk about one thing that you said earlier that touched on the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
And so, again, I want to have your perspective on the impact that COVID-19 had in science, but also in society. What are the positive aspects of it? And I don't want to disregard the negative also. So
Well, there's some many lessons learned from COVID. I mean, it's a giant global experiment that happened that almost went out of control, and it looked like it was going out of control. And what mattered was technology. We have a quantum leap in technology in terms of in therapy, which is the vaccines, the mRNA vaccines. We have never used mRNA vaccines. This is the first time we have it, and the effectiveness and efficacy of this vaccine is just unbelievable, right? So quantum leaps in technology and breakthroughs absolutely critical. But if you go back in history, the mRNA technology was not perceived to be the most promising thing. In fact, it was on the sidelines, and then suddenly COVID happened and new technology. So it's very important to keep an open mind on the scientific pursuit and new technologies coming out. But we also saw that if you don't address this early enough, there's some major challenges that happen later on. And the same thing that you can run the parallels with climate change. We also saw a social aspect of it, that we can have the breakthrough technologies, but if people don't trust the vaccines, they won't get vaccinated. Right now in the United States, there's an abundance of vaccinations available, but about roughly 30% of the people have not been vaccinated. They don't want to get vaccinated. That's a social issue of trust with science. And so I think those aspects are lessons learned, very important. And of course, there's no question that the international or even domestic, how we conduct work and meetings and conferences, I think there'll be a lot of Zoom, as we're now seeing. There'll be a lot of Zoom used for and video conferencing used for many of the meetings. And that, frankly, can reduce your carbon footprint as well. So there's some positive that come out of it.
We're benefiting from it right now, right? So now imagine that you're talking to a young scientist, someone that is just freshly entering a college degree, let's say. What piece of advice do you have for these young aspiring scientists right now?
Well, I wish I was a young undergraduate student joining college right now, because this is one of the most exciting times. It's all a challenging time, there's no question. I don't think we can sugarcoat this moment. There are some challenges out there, but it's also a huge opportunity. Any challenge is an opportunity. So if you want to get into college and make an impact of some kind, and this is the time to get in, because the world, I mean, every moment is a moment in history that we live, but there are some transformational moments where we realize that the fundamentals of a technology, of a sector, are shifting. And it's a paradigm shift that is going on. We are in one of those moments in energy and climate issues and sustainability issues. It is the defining challenge of the 21st century, long term. And we need all the talent we can get to address this. So if I were a student right now, I would consider myself very fortunate and to get into this regime now, this in college right now, because the opportunities to contribute are immense, more than when I was going into college.
So you think that COVID-19 or the life that we're living in, science is on the spotlight, and it's a fruitful scenario. That's fascinating. Yeah. And so we don't have a lot of time. I think we have 1 minute left. And so I'll just finish by asking, what are your expectations for this Falling Walls Summit, and what you're thinking so far about?
So this is my first time, so I'm listening right now. I'm just listening to these fascinating talks. It's great to see the scientific world come together, especially the younger generation. And there's so much going on in different areas of science. So I'm just fascinated by this. I'm really looking forward to the discussions going on today and tomorrow as well. But it's great as a falling wall, as a metaphor, that I think we should be questioning many of the preconceived notions about science and the implications of science, and any strongly held views of tradition. I think this is a time to be thought provoking and asking some thought provoking questions and pushing the boundaries on issues. So I think that's what I'm really looking forward to, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our audience, and what a fascinating conversation that I had with Arun. And yeah, thank you. Thank you so much
Thank you so
for
much.
being here. It was a pleasure.